and welcome back to our Peace Talks. These are little interviews that we have with the bands that are coming to play for us in the Mars Bar in Worcester. This week we've got Francesco Lo Castro. He was actually playing just over a month ago, with Robert Castelli's band. And we had a bit of a change in the program. We had to reschedule our original booking, so Francesco was able to step in, so that's fantastic, bringing up his own band. So welcome, Francesco, and thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So it'd be good to let's start with obviously you're a guitarist, but how did you sort of start getting with all the gear behind? Tell us a little bit about how you actually started getting into playing and particularly the guitar, because I think it was quite later on, wasn't it, in your...
Yeah, I mean, it's in kind of three phases. I would put it. I mean, the first one is like when I was literally a child, like 5 or 6 years old. We didn't live close to my grandparents, and my grandma was into music. I mean, she grew up post Second World War, right? My family is not exactly musical. I mean, non-musician stuff. But she wanted that I had a guitar in the room, like a toy.
Right.
It's not that I took it seriously or that my parents thought, oh, yeah, let's, let him have lessons or something. It was just there. And so it was like a battered kind of nylon string, classical type of thing, which most of the time probably had 2 strings on it or 3. Okay. I used it as a toy for a lot of years. And I guess the second phase, I mean, when I fell in love with the guitar, literally, although again I still was not studying it. I think I was around 15 or 16 when a friend of mine, I mean, I was already into music a lot since I was a kid, but I really got into the guitar. A friend of mine showed me Alchemy, Dire Straits live. He had a VHS, and I was mesmerized by of course Mark Knopfler, but when they were playing Sultans of Swing, the live version, and I was like, oh, you can do that with a guitar. And that's when I really got into I bought the vinyl, and I was literally trying to copy everything off it. And I think the third phase, the serious one, I mean, when I decided to drop, I was studying economy at the time. So I was already kind of 24, 25. When I literally decided I'm going to study guitar, I'm going to be a guitar player. I was around 25, and I came across an album called Friday Night in San Francisco, which is Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and Paco Lucia. And I was like, and again, I had one of those moments where you're like, oh, can you do that with a guitar? And that's when I thought, okay, I need to study. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm gonna be a guitar player. And that's when I started taking lessons. I mean, I was 24 or 25, I don't remember now, but well, I was in Italy, so I was taking private lessons. I took maybe 6-7 months of it, because in Italy at that time, it's not like in England where you have universities, things like this that dedicated to music. We only have the classical, the conservatoire, the equivalent.
Yeah.
Which is something that you start very early. Like generally, your parents send you there when you're 8, 9 years old, because it's 10 years long. Yeah. I think guitar might have been 8, but piano is 10 years long. So that's and plus you're only classically trained. So at 25, I was not interested in being classically trained. I literally want to, it was modern guitar. Let's put it that way. So that's how I literally got into, in phases, but ultimately, around 25 years old, I thought, I love this. That's what I'm going to do for a living.
Excellent. And was it you studied in London, didn't you?
I studied in London because, I took a few lessons. As I was saying, I took some lessons, and I guess when I was a kid, even the fact of just messing around with it in the room, I think I developed probably sense of rhythm, and when I was a kid. So when I started studying, in a way, things fell into place rather quickly. And my teacher, great Italian guy called Johnny Cataleta. And I come from a very small town, but there is no music scene, and sort of at some point he told me, look, if you want to do this, you gotta go. Actually, the metaphor used, the analogy actually used was you cannot sell skis in the desert.
Yep.
So he suggested that I moved to a bigger place, like say Rome or Milan would have been the Italian equivalent of, a place having a music scene. But that's also when I realized that a lot of the music that I liked, that I was passionate about, for some bizarre reason, I never thought of it before. I realized a lot of the things I liked were British, as opposed to American. Let's put it that way. So I liked band like The Cure, Stooges and the Benches, and then of course Dire Straits, and then there was the Eric Clapton phase, and the Alan Ashworths, and etc. etc. And I thought, if I'm going somewhere, I might as well go to London. America felt a bit too far.
Yeah.
So I came here. I, of course, didn't speak English, so I had like a stupid day job. And then around my, I think I was 29 when I enrolled. I found out that you could take a degree in music, and and I thought, okay, I'll do that. I was already kind of playing, pub gigs, and I was playing, but I thought, it would be nice to have something, like, I know it's just a piece of paper, but it was nice to, even if I was much older than most of the students there. But yeah, 29, it was Thames Valley University, which I think now is called the University of East London. And that's where I graduated and also got a master's degree from them. Because I won an award at the end of my degree because of my marks. They offered me to do a master's degree. I didn't have to pay for it. So I thought,
oh, wow, cool. Yeah, excellent.
And yeah, that's my educational career.
Yeah, so you mentioned sort of Dire Straits was kind of the Sultans of Swing maybe was the thing that sort of got you first interested in it, and you mentioned McLaughlin and Al Di Meola along the way there. How did that? Because obviously what we're doing with Music Spoken here is sort of showcasing bands that are jazz influenced but have got lots of other things going on, and jazz is quite a niche, which is what I'm trying to do with Music Spoken here, sort of bring it out a little bit more into the open and sort of what people are doing with it today. So where would you say your sort of jazz influence came from, and what's your experience of sort of playing with bands like, where it's sort of crossing over and fusing into other genres?
Well, the thing is, like, musically, I grew up in the south of Italy. We'll start from that, where sun and ice cream is the order of the day. We're not upset, let's put it that way. And I always had a passion for improvisation. Even when I was learning the Dire Straits stuff, and we used to meet up, it was me and a guy playing a badly piano and so forth, but we were both into Dire Straits or something, so we were copying all the songs. And the same with The Cure. I used to know all the songs by The Cure, But I always liked improvising. Like I always liked, okay, if there is a solo, I learned all the Mark Knopfler solos, but I like the idea of every time doing it differently. At that point, I was not really aware of jazz as a form of music. As when I say jazz, I mean swing music, as in, bebop, bebop. I was not really aware of that. I became aware of that when I started studying, because my teacher was into it. So in a way, into jazz, I kind of found a place where improvisation was the order of the day. And even the way the music was written, it was not anymore like a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus, like a bit like pop music is structured. It was more like, okay, here is a head. So you compose the part with an harmony, a melody, and a rhythm. Now improvise. And they will play the head again at the end. And that's the end of the tune. So I find myself in a like, okay, this is a good home to be with. This is not where I come from musically, but this is a good home where to be. And then I was lucky enough. I mean, this is already, I'm fast forwarding into my 30s, where I was lucky to I mean, I'm lucky still today, because I still tour with an Italian crooner around the world. And I had the opportunity to play in the US several times. I toured the US probably 5 or 6 times. And in a way, as a guitar player, that's a bit like going to the mothership. And I think I'll never forgot the sensation of listening to, had earbuds and listening to Miles Davis while in Brooklyn. And I was looking around, and it really sounded like the soundtrack of the US. I mean, it's like the music was not just beautiful. I could look around me and be like, this looks amazing. I mean, it's the kind of soundtrack of this. And that's when I also realized, look, I'm Italian. I, when I listen to Miles Davis and I'm in a car in London, it sounds fantastic. But when I look outside, it's not a soundtrack of what I see. And I
Mhm.
grew up around melody on top of that, because I say, like, it's sun and ice cream where I come from, and nice food. So I started kind of merging these two ideas where, yeah, I like to improvise, but I don't necessarily, for as much as I love bebop, party bop, that's not what I come from. I mean, I love it, but it's not my language, it's not
Mm.
my vocabulary. I need to bring in things that kind of belong a bit more. What comes easy to me? I mean, melody is something that comes very easy to me, because that's the soundtrack of my surroundings. It's always been, it's very cinematic, in a way.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's the idea. Like, that's where the two worlds kind of some point collided and be like, okay, I'm gonna start doing music which is influenced by my personal influences. It's not necessarily rooted in bebop or the bop, but what it contains is the entire idea of what are, the language of improvisation.
Mm. Yeah.
That's bananas, and it's, and some of the harmony, the harmonic ideas that come from that tradition, from bebop and bop, and all the way generated then into fusion, etc., etc., etc. But that's mainly like, where it comes from is trying to be me.
No, that's grand.
It's like,
Yeah, and I noticed you use the word soundtrack there quite a few times, and I've seen sort of reading through some of your stuff and kind of and the work you're doing. And I think that really is it. It's your, you're in a space and time that
yeah,
kind of it gives you a character to what you want, what you want to play, and that changes as your life moves on to different places and to
yeah,
in
yeah.
different times.
Because I'm also like let's say a composer, you know, in a way out of necessity, in the sense that there is some music that I write being very aware that I will not be able to perform it live, because it's too many instruments, or it's too complex, or it's not the kind of, it's written pretty much. And then there is like music that I compose knowing that it's going to be performed live. So it's got a
Right.
different kind of structure. It's already in mind. Okay, this is for 3 people. This is for 4 people. This is, I'm playing nylon string guitar. Yet I want to play electric guitar. It's very eclectic. The kind of body of work I have by now, which I think is 14 or 15 albums.
Yeah.
Worth of
Wow.
music, and
Yeah.
I wrote much more than that. That's the ones that I end up somehow sharing with the public. And to me, it's like, I tend to think of my music like a music in search of images, as in,
Right.
that's how I see it. And even the part which is performed live, in a way, then the middle section of each song becomes a template for people to improvise on. But in terms of the heads, and in terms of the melodies, if they were extrapolated and then taken it out of context, out of the live context, it's very cinematic. I tend to write for images, even if the images are not there. I struggle finding titles.
Right.
I sometimes joke during gigs saying it takes me longer to find a title that sounds cool, as opposed to to actually write the music.
Mm.
But and so yeah, it ends up in that kind of thing. Also because don't forget again, like. And that's more of my heritage. It's not that you do it on purpose. I might not quote Ennio Morricone as a reference, but being Italian, his music, it's in the movies we watch, and a lot of people has been influenced in that way of composing. So a lot of the movie soundtracks of Italian work, when you watch TV or stuff, has got that kind of influence.
Mm.
So you grow up with that, as I said, and let alone all the opera, all the Verdi, the Puccini's, and it's, you are affected by it because you grow up in Italy. That's not even like who's my favorite artist. That's just happening. It's a bit, I
Yeah.
guess, like for Americans. Like for Americans, they hear jazz differently. I mean, my experience, I recorded 2 albums in the U.S., and I was asked to play with some American guys
Hmm.
because they were finding me melodic. They were not used to that. And I
Okay.
was
Yeah.
incredibly surprised by that. But it's true that they hear music much more in an angular way, like it's got more tension, right?
Right.
Which kind of makes sense given the surroundings.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
It's the
And instead, like,
pace of life there and everything else, isn't it? Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
instead, like, if you apply that to my heritage, where I come from, then suddenly, like, everything is, it's definitely more melodic. It's inevitable. you know.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean, as you can see, being Italian means that I can talk a lot. So feel free to stop me at any time.
No, no, it's all good.
If you feel like moving on to something else, because I can go on and on.
No, this is all good. This is all good. So I mean, what are you working on at the moment? What, because yeah, like you said, you got 16 albums. I've seen that you've been doing. I was quite interested in what you were doing on. Is it through? I can't remember if it's through Bandcamp. I think it was through Bandcamp that you've been doing a number of pieces that are like chapter one, chapter two. Talk us
Oh,
through
yeah.
what that is. Yeah.
Well, another influence of mine. I mean, it's like, if there is a few artists who actually influenced me, and not necessarily Italian. Another one has always been Mike Oldfield. I was really impressed when I heard, when I heard Tubular Bells, the very first version. I heard it was already in the 90s. I know it came out in 74, but I heard it when I was at uni for the first time, and I figured out, oh, this guy is doing everything himself. And of course, fast forward to my generation of computers and laptops, I've always been interested in the recording process. I also engineer all my albums besides writing them.
Right.
I've always
Okay.
been into mixing, mastering, all that kind of side effects. And I am, it's like, I am a little bit of a multi-instrumentalist in the sense that I can play and record myself playing several stuff. So the other side was, from time to time, I enjoy sitting down and play everything, and again, not necessarily take into account, can this be played live? So book one, which was the album you mentioning, is, I don't know, probably like 36, 37 different instruments, some computerized, some are real, and it's basically a one long 1 hour composition. I subdivided in chapters, again, because in a way it's easier to do it that way than to have to think of a title. That also allows. I did the same for a project which was called 2019, which turned out to be 5 different albums.
Yes.
To cut a story short, I mean, because I'm a visionary. In 2019, it was actually at the end of 2018. It was one of those New Eve resolution. I realized that it was 3 years that I didn't sit down and write an album, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I had one of those resolution where, okay, I'm going to write a tune a week for the next year. So I'm going to take maybe like some time off work. I'm not going to take as much work as I used to.
Yeah.
And, and do a tune a week, which I did. and of course I recorded everything myself because I could not, possibly afford, that kind of project.
Yeah.
And ended up being like 5 albums worth of material, which and again, it was 2019 and it became week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Those are the titles.
Yes. Yeah.
Because again, I didn't want to think about 52 different titles as I went along. And the same thing, probably book 1 gives me a chance of one day to do book 2. And have chapter 10, chapter 11, chapter. It kind of is a bit like
becomes quite predictable. Maybe we should hold a competition to put titles to the way people listen to the tune and come up with a title they feel that's what it means to them.
Sometimes it's funny enough you say that, because sometimes, like, I tell you, it's if it tells you something, just let me know. Why not?
Yeah.
One thing I like about instrumental music, and that's, I've done one recorded album with the vocalist because she's a fantastic vocalist. It was the album I released in 2015, which was called From Distant Shores, which was a collaboration in between me as a writer and an Italian singer called Michele Lombardi, fantastic singer. And I thought, okay, she'll put lyrics to these melodies, and we did that. But beside that, I always, in a way, preferred instrumental music, because lyrics somehow they kind of tell you what to think about.
Yes. Yeah.
While instrumental music, if I don't tell you what I was thinking of, you can, and I generally don't. And that's the reason, not because I don't want to say the stories behind any particular piece of music, but in a way, if I do, I kind of channel the listener towards seeing what I was trying to see, as opposed to see what you want. Because that's how to me, music has always been a soundtrack. When I listen to other people's music, is the soundtrack of, either what I'm thinking or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's always, I always, I remember being 9, 10 years old and going to sleep with headphones on every single night with tapes, cassette tapes. And I don't know, I was listening, I don't know, it could have been anything, even Iron Maiden. But then, like, imagining things while I was listening, it was not just, oh, I like the song. I was, I don't know, picturing myself and playing it, or, like a car race, or, it's always been like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it seems that the music sort of comes to you and from you with a sort of visual connection. A lot of what you've been saying is there's always a sort of visual and imagery associated with it. Whereas, some people will react more with emotions or maybe verbal, sort of thoughts and words and things. So yeah, like you say, I mean, it's music, you put it out there and it'll be interpreted by different people in lots of different ways.
And I like that, because that's how I experienced it. So in a way, for me, as a performer, now I say this as a performer as opposed to a composer, it's a two-way street. It's not, I'm playing some music, oh, just listen to me and tell me, see what I see, and tell me how good I am, or something like this. It's like, take it somewhere, and hopefully it's going to be the soundtrack of your life. Or if it's a live performance, it's like an hour, or if it's like earbuds while traveling, whatever the context. That's how I see it. That's the role of music in my life now. I don't supposed to impose it on other people, but it's just a suggestion how it can be experienced, as opposed to being a one-way street.
Yeah, cool. So is there any specific projects that you're working on at the moment? Are you working on any albums or
well, the thing is, the thing is, like, for the gig in Worcester, I was about to say Worcester. I know it's for the gig in Worcester. Actually, like, I'm gonna be playing a phone, as opposed to show up and promote an album. Like, sometimes the way music works is like you record an album and then you tour it and it around. But since it's my first appearance there, I thought, like, okay, I'm gonna play music from different albums, even if when I'm performing, let's say, on electric guitar in this case, and on nylon strings, and play music that I haven't even recorded yet, so it has not been even released. And I think after the gig, it's not been released yet. So it's the London audiences and some of the European audiences have heard the music, but they cannot buy the music. Let's put it, not yet.
Yeah.
But I like that's something that I like to do, as opposed to, oh, here is what I did, here is the CD, kind of thing. At the same time, at the moment, I have a few ideas in my head. Of course, like, at some point I will go in the studio and record some of the material that I'm playing in Worcester later on. I did an album almost 10 years ago now, which was nylon string guitar and piano. It was literally just a duo with a wonderful piano player called Bruno D'Ambra. And I'm thinking, and maybe after 10 years, I was listening to it, and I thought, it was not nostalgia. It was more like, I think we are ready for chapter 2 of that. Like, and probably the evolution is going to be some sort of organ quartet with a saxophone added, but still going back to nylon string for that, and probably guitar synth, because I like when the guitar can also drive other sounds, and I do that live too. So, like, that kind of, I have the composition, and now I'm just picturing the sonics in my head, and that's something that definitely I want to do. So basically these two recording projects, and then of course I'm still composing. Like I said, every time I'm in front of a computer, I cannot imagine how those guys in the 70s or 80s, actually up to the 90s, were. You had to go to a studio, and it was very expensive, and you needed to have a record label, and so it must have been very complicated for people to have, like, millions of ideas and then not being able to. You did
it all on a 4-track cassette, didn't you? I started out playing in the 90s, and you had like a Tascam cassette with 4 tracks, and you
That's the
you could
first
record an
thing.
overdub on that, and
That's the first thing I bought when I arrived in London. Probably 3 months later, the moment they gave me a credit card.
okay.
The moment they said, "Yeah,
Good use of credit.
you should have a credit card," and I was like, "Okay." I went to buy, yeah, I bought a 4 tape, like a 4 track cassette tape. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because it is a lot easier now, because I sort of I used to play years ago, sort of 30 years ago. I started playing bass, so I just sort of play around with stuff, and there wasn't everything was, you could do things with MIDI, and there was
Mm.
some software, but yeah, most of it was analog. It was just sort of starting to go into digital. But I was surprised, sort of like in picking things up in the last couple of years, how easy it is to actually sort of just throw things together on an iMac with GarageBand or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of balance it up. I kind of wonder if it's in one way it's a great thing, because it's accessible to everyone, and it's easier for people to do. But then at the same time, it it can be I think it can produce a lot of very similar sounding stuff, and almost sort of mechanized
Mm.
to some extent as well. So I think it's an interesting,
I think you're right. I mean, I think you're right, and in a way, the fact that anybody can then upload this stuff on Spotify. I mean, this stuff
yes,
can then
yeah,
be somehow released. Let's put it that way. Makes it hard, at least for me, makes it hard to find new music that I'm interested in, because I end up having to skip a lot of things before something doesn't feel average. Let's put it that way. It's also true that, like the tools that the newer generations are given in the hands of creative people, they do amazing things.
mm,
You see what I'm saying? It
yeah,
has become just harder to find. I mean, like my generation was, another guy telling me, you should listen to this, and maybe borrow me a cassette tape,
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
or a vinyl or whatever there was. And that's how you discovered new things. Now it's you go on YouTube or Spotify, and you end up listening to the stuff that you already know because it's safe, as opposed to I'm going to try something random.
mm,
And it became a little bit more complicated from that point of view, because everybody can release, if anything.
yes,
But
yeah.
the fact that everybody can make music, that's I think that's a very nice thing in a way.
And
Of
it's now
course,
much
like,
easier to get it out, and yeah, like you were
yeah,
saying,
yeah,
yeah,
it becomes a bit chaotic because it becomes a business for companies like Spotify and YouTube, because
yeah,
to them it's like it's money. Yeah, sure, release your music. There is no, in a way, like it or not, the record labels kind of functioned as some sort of filter.
yeah,
you know, it has to sell, sure,
yes,
but
yeah, yeah,
somehow
exactly, yeah,
it was also good. Like now, some people might like pop music or not like manufactured kind of pop kind of thing,
yeah,
but it was well done. Nobody's going to argue if a Spandau Ballet was
yeah,
well produced or not. You might
yeah,
like it or not, but it was well done, or Duran Duran, or whatever, Kylie Minogue, you name it. So record label kind of worked a bit like a filter.
it was, yeah, sort of
Where
gatekeeper to some extent.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
gatekeeper.
the quality
That would be,
bar, yeah, yeah,
yeah, that would be the word. Now, because you have also this kind of thing where everything is out, and it's a bit distracting.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's the way it's going. It's moving with the times, I suppose.
Sure.
So you'll. I'm just looking at the clock because we've got a few more minutes now. Yeah. So you're coming. You're returning to the Mars Bar. You're one of the
Yeah.
few musicians we've had come back for a second time round, but now with your own band. So yeah, tell us a little bit about who you're bringing up with you in your band.
Oh, that's some fantastic guy. I love these guys. So on keyboards, there is Sam Lake, which is very, very, very talented. Not only like keyboard player, he's a fantastic piano player, and he's an excellent organ player. And I like his sensitivity. I mean, he responds well to my music, and in a way, it's easier for me when people has the same kind of sensitivity, and then I love when they do their own thing. And Sam is one of those that I literally trust. Him doing his own thing.
Yeah, that's great.
And I'm lucky enough that I get to play with a lot of different musicians, excellent musicians, and I said Sam is one of them. Rob Statham is playing bass. Is I call him the most elegant bass player I ever seen. Not only heard, because he's a fantastic musician, but his posture. I met him because I also teach at universities these days. And he's one of the bass teachers at BEAM in London. And oh, beautiful. I played with him last Saturday. You know, I end up listening to him more than listening to myself, which actually is a good thing. And on drummer, I mean, like, I don't know if he needs introduction. Neil Bullock. I mean, it's like, I'm sure you might have seen his website. I mean, the list of credits.
Yes,
this guy
yeah,
has.
yeah.
I mean, I know him from my teaching days, so I know him as a drummer. You know, but for those that don't, I mean, sometimes, you know, Neil is such a wonderful guy. You know, in my experience as a musician, sometimes you come across the CVs of people where you know that they're a bit exaggerating.
Right, yeah.
You know, there is like, you know, maybe they've done a masterclass, but they make it look like, you know, I played with that guy.
Yeah.
And Neil played with those guys. I mean, Neil's CV is literally what he has done, as in, like, this is the opus stuff. Probably would have another 2 kilometers of credits, which, you know, didn't find a space in there. Incredible musician. I really, like I said, I really enjoy listening to them while I'm playing. It's incredibly inspiring, and that's the beauty of jazz. I mean, in a way, if you want to go full circle, because the art of improvisation is this thing of listening to other people are doing on stage at the same time as you, and trying to interleave with what they're doing, as opposed to, oh, here is me soloing, do comp, and then okay, now you're soloing, I'm comping. It's all happening at the same time. So I kind of take ideas from these people while we're playing, and you need the right people to do this kind of stuff. You can, you know, and so this bunch of musicians I'm taking to Worcester are, you know, top of the class.
Fantastic. Well, really looking forward to seeing and hearing from you, and hearing that new material as well that we've not had recorded. It'd be great to leave. I know it's a tough decision, a tough question for everyone that I speak to. You know, to pick three. If you had to pick three albums that, not necessarily favorites, but maybe the most significant, maybe in your, you know, in the time that you've been listening and playing music. What would your three be?
Well, I would say, I mean, I love hundreds of albums have influenced me, and tons of artists, but there are probably, like, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 who actually are life defining, and some I mentioned before. I mean, like, time has passed. I might not feel that way anymore, but Alchemy by Dire Straits changed my perception of guitar. Friday Night in San Francisco, so Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, etc., and Paolo Lucia. There is an Italian band called CSI. GSA would be in Italian. CSI sounds like the TV series.
Yeah.
And they released an album in the 1990s called Tabula Rasa Elettrificata. And that was, and in that case, that's with lyrics and everything. The guy that writes the lyrics is a real poet in my head. And that was really important to me, also musically, because I'm a little bit of a punk guy, even when it comes to jazz. So and this band was kind of like Tubular Bells. That's also kind of defining me. And I would say Secret Story, Pat Metheny.
Oh, right. Pat Metheny, yeah.
Again, I heard that when I was at uni, and I was like, oh wow, okay.
I noticed actually that the clip that we had from the Mars bar of you playing, we caught some of that on the video that I shared recently, and that did sound very much. I could hear it when I was playing it back. I thought, yeah, there's some Metheny.
Definitely. I mean, if you start talking guitar players, I mean, definitely Pat Metheny, like John Scofield, Frizzell, Alan Ashworth, you know, Stephen Ray Vaughan, you name. I mean, Joe Pass. I mean, they're all in there, and they pop out at different parts depending on the mood. You know, I play moods in a way when I'm playing, and so depending on the mood, one of them will pop out as an influence in what I'm doing. But yeah, definitely Pat Metheny. I mean, it's such a pillar of history guitar. I mean, I know he's still alive, but people will study him and study his way of composing. You know, many years after us.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Thanks for those three. And like I say, we're really looking forward to welcoming you back to the Mars Bar in Worcester in just a week's time. And thanks for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. We can't wait to be there.
Excellent.